I'm already getting heat for defending Nick Sirianni. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying it's not a big deal. The flower analogy, but
It's a busy Wednesday. Welcome in, everyone, to Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen, presented by Stateside Vodka here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel on The Big Show. To wrap up Wednesday night, Dan Campbell, his team is 0-7, yet the players are all 100% of the roster is buying in. We'll talk to John McMullen about Dan Campbell's phone press conference today. We'll also get the story from John on the meaning behind the flowers from head coach Nick Sirianni. We'll talk about that. Jalen Hurts back to work, taking all of the first team reps, and a lot more, including a great article published in Philly Mag by Johnny Mac on Eagles Report. Johnny Mac, welcome in, brother. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Yeah, Nick Sirianni, quite the uproar over a flower analogy.
John, would it be unfair for
Yes.
me to would it be unfair for me to ask you to set the stage, tell us what the question was? How did he describe the flower analogy? Is that going overboard?
Well, I think the reaction to the flower analogy was over the top. I got to be honest. I thought people were a little bit unfair. Nick is big on analogies to begin with, but I kind of just tweeted out. I mean, the last thing I want is Shane Steichen. The last thing I want is coach speak. So I wish these people would kind of settle down a little bit, because the last thing I want is this guy going into a shell. You're just going to get less information, less insight on what's going around. But that's neither here nor there. I don't know how many people listen to the quotes in its entirety. People jump on it on Twitter pretty quickly. And basically, it was just saying the results aren't there, but like a flower, the roots are growing underneath that you can't see it. And, hopefully it pops, as he described it, down the road. It wasn't that bad of an analogy, but it's, and I compared it to Ray Rhodes. If people have been around for a while, you mentioned Ray Rhodes, probably his most famous quote is about when he compared opponents coming into the family home and sodomizing the wife and children. That's what Philadelphia wants. They don't want to hear about flowers. They don't want to hear about flowers with their football team. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Do they win? Do they lose? Are people buying in? Are people not buying in?
Well, that's where I think it matters a little bit, John, and only from this context. Listen, if Nick Sirianni wants to talk about flowers, so be it. I want to know if some of the examples that kind of surfaced after the Raiders game on Sunday are any indication at all that some of those players on the roster are not buying in. AKA Fletcher Cox verbalized it in the press conference. I think I heard you in a conversation this morning with Jody Mack even reference the uncharacteristic frustration of Jason Kelce, not at the podium, not on a microphone, but on the field in that one. Call it a little bit of a scrum or whatever you want to call it. Are some of the players not buying in And maybe that's the method to the madness about the state, about the Flowers analogy. I don't know. I'm asking.
Well, I think on the best teams, Super Bowl winning teams, I always say this all the time. I would say it with Carson Wentz, and people would say, well, not everybody likes Carson Wentz. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, not everybody did. You get 69 people together, and guess what? They're not all going to like each other. That to me is common sense. I know the next 69 people giving me comments are not going to be positive. I can tell you that. I'm already getting heat for defending Nick Sirianni. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying it's not a big deal. The flower analogy. But Jason Kelsey spoke today as well. And he talked about that moment of frustration in Vegas. And he admitted there's a lot. Trying to bring it up as we're talking here. He said there's a lot of frustration up to this point. I mean, when you put a lot into your job, when you put a lot into coming here every single day, things get frustrating when you're not having the success the way you want. And that always doesn't come out in the healthiest way. And that played a part in how we reacted on the field. But as usual, Jason also was asked it flat out, is the team buying in? And he said, and I'll quote him again, I mean, you don't really have a choice. If you want to be a good team, you're in it together. That's what being on a team is about. I think we have good leadership here. If guys weren't buying in, that would be a direct reflection of leadership, in my opinion. I think we have good players here, good people, good coaches. We're not producing the way we need to be. It's not showing up on the field the way it needs to. But the only way we're going to get better is by sticking together and continuing to fight. So he's putting sort of the mantle of buying in on the veteran leaders. Look, the two
That doesn't
things.
sound like it doesn't. That quote, though, doesn't necessarily sound like a full-blown ringing endorsement that everybody in the locker room is buying into what's happening, in terms of the direction of the football team. I don't know.
Well, he also went in, and again, I bring up Jason because he's so well spoken and he's so honest at times, and you saw him last week talking about Ben Simmons for example. And he talked about, Nick says doubling down all the time. And he said, I mean, every coach, you don't come in and say, hey guys, we're not going to double down this week. We're not going to try to get better. We're not going to try to focus on our mistakes. We're not going to try to improve on what we did last week. He's right. Who does that? The doubling down is just, we know what works. In other words, the fundamentals, that kind of stuff. The way to be successful is to improve all those things by continuing to iron out mistakes. A lot of the stuff, what Jason Kelsey is saying, is common sense. I mean, not everybody is going to be happy in an NFL locker room. The two things are not mutually exclusive, because Fletcher Cox is not happy changing schemes where he was used in a way that got him to 5 consecutive Pro Bowls and won him a Super Bowl in 5 years. That doesn't mean everybody's not buying in. It means Fletcher Cox is unhappy. So I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. The vast majority of these players, and again, you're going to see continued turnover as the years go by. And there's not going to be very many Peterson, Schwartz names in this locker room by next year, really. You're going to see a pretty complete turnover. And then it's going to be Nick Sirianni's team and Jonathan Gannon's team. And that'll make a difference. And then there's certain guys. Jason Kelsey is one. I caught up with Brandon Graham today. Brandon's happy as ever. They really miss him. And he joked that the fact that they're playing so poorly has bought him another year because they're certainly going to want him back. But I mean, he's happy. So I don't think Fletcher Cox is indicative of anything other than Fletcher Cox, to be honest.
Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen. We will get in and talk about week number 8 as the Eagles go on the road. The Lions are 0-7. The Eagles are 2-5. One last thought, John, before we move off of that, the context of that analogy, and this is just from a pure opinion from you based on your expertise. You've watched a lot of football in your career. Is this football team getting better each week?
No, I don't think they are. And that's disappointing. And that's the part. But I think most of that, not all of it, but I think most of that is personnel related. I think if you had, and I've said it, for about a week now, if they had a better quarterback and 2 linebackers, I think, this team might be 5-2 instead of 2-5. So I think most of it is personnel driven. I think it's a little bit disappointing the coaching staff isn't as malleable as they were sold as, building schemes around the talent they have. I think if they did that, the defense would look more like it did under Jim Schwartz, which people didn't like anyway. So I'm not sure that's a positive, but it would be better on the field. And the offense would be a little bit more consistent as for its identity. We've been asking, we're in week 7. We're constantly asking the quarterback and the head coach, what's the identity of this offense? It has no identity. There's nothing foundational about it. And I think the herky-jerky nature, look, they've had one good game plan. It was the opening week at Atlanta. And a lot of that had to do with nobody knowing what to expect. In the minute the Eagles offense got put on film, Nick Sirianni tried to, at first, I think he tried to put different things on film. You look at San Francisco in week 2, instead of using what worked in Atlanta, he went a totally different direction because San Francisco was down a couple corners and tried the football down the field, throw the football down the field with a quarterback who isn't accurate throwing the football down the field. And that was a disaster. And then from that point forward, it's been all over the place. There's no identity. So that part's disappointing. People should be disappointing about that. But again, I don't know what people were expecting with a rookie head coach, a rookie defensive coordinator, this young coaching staff. Were they expecting Andy Reid at his height? I don't know what they were expecting other than growing pains.
I understand the growing pains. I get learning on the job. I just wonder if a guy like Devontae Smith, your number 1 pick, your Heisman Trophy winner, I just wonder if Devontae Smith is not having the impact that he should be having, or that fans expect him to be having 7 games into the season. I get it. He's a rookie. I get it. You've been talking about size and some of the challenges he's going to have going all the way back into your training camp reports. But I almost feel like he's not out there at times. And I feel as though he's the one playmaker that we should always know he's out there.
Yeah, he is, and that's part of the problem. One, because Nick Sirianni's play sheet, and he always says, you have to have calls for your best playmakers, and the player on his play sheet that has more calls than anybody else to get him the football is Devontae Smith. 2 things about that: it's not good because he's a rookie, and it tells you how deficient the Eagles are in other spots. But 2, and if you want to go back to last year, I'll give you an example because everybody talks about Jalen Reagor versus Justin Jefferson. And obviously the Eagles probably should have drafted Justin Jefferson. Not probably. He's a better player. He's a better receiver. They should have drafted him. They were trying to get too cute. They wanted a different type of receiver. And it turns out that Jefferson's just a really good receiver who can play anywhere. The Eagles thought he was a slot receiver. All he does is play outside. He plays and he can go in the slot and dominate from there. So, but what I told people is the assumption he, had the most yardage in, 50 years for a rookie receiver. I think it was 1,400 exactly. The assumption that if the Eagles drafted him, that he would get 1,400 yards in that offense last season wasn't happening. He went to a high volume offense with a quarterback who throws consistently. And I know people like to rip Kirk Cousins. So I just pulled it up. You go back to 2015 in Washington. He threw 70% completions, 4,166 yards. 2016, almost 5,000 yards, 49-17. 2017, 4,000. Again, 2018, 4,300. 2020, last year, 4,300. 2019 was his low water mark, 3,600. That is a high volume passer. That is a guy with tremendous consistency that can deliver, and when it comes to accuracy, that can deliver the football to receivers. You don't have that here. So if Devontae Smith was with that type of quarterback, he'd be putting up big numbers. He's not going to put up big numbers until you get that type of quarterback.
Good stuff from John McMullen tonight across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and if you're watching and you have not done it yet, subscribe to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We're zeroing in on 8,000 subscribers. We're about 30 away from 8,000, and we've come a long way from that starting point of 11, Johnny Mac, when it all began. So we continue to thank everyone who continues to like, share, comment, and subscribe here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel presented by Stateside Vodka. Don't forget statesidevodka.com. We've changed the offering where now by using the keyword JAKIB, you get 15%. Still get 15%, but you get 15% off of the Stateside Vodka soda. 4 flavors are available in the pack. 15% off the popular vodka soda. That's on statesidevodka.com. John, prior to coming on for Football 24/7 tonight, you had to phone presser with the Lions head coach. How did it sound? How did he sound? How's that team feel being 0-7?
Well, nobody's happy being 0-7, but Dan Campbell. I mean, the Lions, I think people would be surprised, have been in a lot of these games that they've lost. They lost one on a 66-yard field goal, 66, the record from the greatest kicker of all time, Justin Tucker, at the buzzer, so to speak. They lost the next week, I think, on a 56-yard field goal, or they would have won that game. They've been close. They played the Rams really tough, which might be the best team in the NFC. So you always hear they're better than their record. The Lions have been better than their record. But, I asked Dan Campbell, what do you got to do to get over the hump? And he said, you just got to make that play. That's what a lot of the NFL is about, is one score games, about finding a way to make that play to turn the loss into a win. And you have to learn how to win. And it's a process, especially with younger players. What's probably most disappointing about the Eagles is they haven't had enough one score games. So you could say they've been able to win too. Probably didn't deserve, as I said, to beat Carolina. They got outplayed, found a way to win the game, probably outplayed San Francisco, but lost that game. So that kind of evens out. The one good game they played was the season opener in Atlanta. Everything else, they've been blown out. If you're going to be honest and ignore the garbage time, they've been blown out. So that part isn't good. And this team's a little bit more dangerous than you would think by looking at 0-7. That said, they have a ton of injuries. Just some good players. Frank Ragnow, people might not know him. He might be the best center in football. And we know about centers with Jason Kelce. Frank Ragnow might be even better than Jason Kelce. He's out. Both of their starting corners are out. So they have a lot of injury issues as well. You got to find a way to beat a team that's 0-7. What Dan Campbell is facing is, at some point when you don't win, guys it's human nature. They get dejected. Here we go again, waiting for the other shoe to drop, and losing sort of becomes a habit, a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what's you're starting to turn down that negative road in Detroit. But I got to tell you, the Lions are probably looking at this game and saying, okay, we can win this game. This is a game that they think they could win. This is a big one for the Eagles. It's tough to say anything's big when you're 2-5, but if they play poorly in Detroit and lose to a winless team, then you start talking about Gardner Minshew and all the negative stuff.
If they have a horrible first half and find themselves playing from behind the lead way back, is Gardner Minshew potentially playing in Detroit on Sunday?
I don't think so. I think the next week would be the first. As you mentioned, Nick Sirianni said Jalen Hurts will take every first team rep. So they're not planning on it. Now, look, if you're down 24-0, all bets are off. And they might say, well, Gardner's more capable of just, going back in the pocket, throwing the football. Yeah, but it would have to be something so lopsided. Otherwise, Jalen's going to get this game, but Jalen's got to win this game. And if the Eagles look bad again offensively, and they lose this game, then you start thinking about, okay, let's look at the other guy.
John, what has Jalen been like? I mean, I know so many times from camp up to now, you've always talked about that one intangible that Jalen Hurts always has. Never gets too high, never gets too low. I forget what the phrase is that you've always used to describe his temperature. But is he the same today as he was 3 weeks ago?
Oh yeah, never changes. Never ever changes. I mean, just straight line, man, straight line. Um, which is, part of that is really good. Um, I've always said about Jalen Hurts from pretty much very early on from meeting him. It's rare. It's usually the opposite. Somebody has the talent to play in the NFL. You look at Trevor Lawrence as the number one overall pick in Jacksonville. He has the talent to play in the NFL. You you wonder about the other stuff. Can he be a leader? Does he have those intangibles? Will people follow him? Will people gravitate towards him? Will people fight for him as a leader on the football field? Can he handle the pressure being a starting NFL quarterback? All that kind of stuff. All what we call intangibles, which you can't put a number on them, and it drives analytics people crazy. Um, you have to learn about all those quarterbacks. Jalen's the opposite. You knew he had all that stuff, even as a very, very young man. People naturally gravitate towards him. Teammates love him. Um, they just, root for him. They want to be around him. They want to fight for him. But you don't know if he has the talent to play the position at a high level in the NFL. Um, from a passing standpoint, he has it from a running standpoint. And to date, it's only 7 games. And I'm not going to overreact, just like I don't overreact with the head coach or the defensive coordinator. To date, it doesn't look good. Um, can he turn it around? Sure. But, the accuracy is not there. The decision making is not there. And that's what the Eagles value in the quarterback position more
How
than anything else.
how does it work at practice with Jalen, with the starting quarterback? Is he getting coached up, or is he just executing plays?
Well, Jim Schwartz told me, and this is the modern NFL because of the scaled back time. Um, the off season is for teaching. Training camp is for evaluation, and regular season is for preparation. That's what it is. That's what the NFL calendar is. Um, there's a little bit. At the beginning of training camp, you're still in the teaching mode, so there's a little bit of overlap. But his point was, once you get to the regular season in the NFL, it's all about prep for the next opponent. There's very little time for developmental, so to speak, portions of practice. Doug Peterson, Deuce Staley is, and we talked to Dan Campbell about that. Deuce Staley and Dave Bipp are obviously out in Detroit on his staff. Deuce Staley was in charge of the developmental program under Doug Peterson. They would do a couple, you're not allowed, remember, you're not allowed to keep the players on the field over a strict allotment in the CBA. So a lot of these guys on the practice squad, a lot of these younger players, there's not a lot of developmental time that comes in the off season, to be honest. It's all about beating the Detroit Lions. That's what this week was about. Last week was about beating the Las Vegas Raiders. just what the NFL season is.
Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Johnny Mac, good stuff here on a Wednesday. Will you be back on Birds 365 tomorrow? Are you in tomorrow morning?
I am. I will be back with Jody. We got Chris Franklin from NJ.com. We got Dave Burkett from the Detroit Free Press. So we got
good stuff.
We got Lions preview from their perspective, and we got a great Eagles beat guy on Birds 365.
Great stuff from John McMullen. Doing great work here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Johnny Mac, good stuff again to everybody watching, liking, subscribing, sharing, and continuing to be part of the JAKIB Media Network. We say thank you to you, and we'll see you next time.